West Live Online for Wednesday, February 8th, 2023. My name is Drew Clark. I'm the editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast, and very excited to welcome you to this, our weekly Broadband Breakfast Live Online event. As it happens, this is the worst time in the world to have a website outage, but we are having one at this moment. So all of you who are here on this platform on Zoom are able to see us and participate, and as well as all the other platforms too, to my knowledge. We're live on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn and YouTube. And so all of those people are also seeing us. But for those who watch Broadband Breakfast Live Online on Broadband Breakfast, you're probably not able to see it right now, but you will be able to see it later on, because our recordings, after they're made, are immediately available live online on the web page for the event. We have a really great topic, and it's super timely. We didn't even sort of think to try to time this event to the State of the Union address, but President Biden, in his State of the Union address last night, spoke very specifically about Buy America and fiber optic cable. So really, this is the perfect time to talk about our main subject that we're going to be talking about. But before I do that, two quick announcements, and then I'm going to introduce a special guest for a short presentation. We at Broadband Breakfast Live Online are doing this event, this weekly event. We've been doing it coming up on 3 years. With the start of the pandemic is when we started doing this free event on Broadband Breakfast Live Online. And we have a great program every week, we believe. And we have our upcoming weeks. Next week, we're going to be talking about the next phase of state broadband offices. The week after, we're going to be talking about workforce development issues. And then the following, we'll be doing a preview of the Big Tech and Speech Summit. And that is, of course, a conference that we're doing, a full day conference, 8:30 in the morning till about 3:30 in the afternoon. It'll be at Clyde's of Gallery Place, like the last conference we had, Digital Infrastructure Investment at Clyde's Gallery Place. We've got the agenda and the program on Broadband Breakfast once the website is back up, of course. It's really going to be covering the key topics around speech, technology, Section 230, privacy, innovation, and antitrust, and the state of tech and our internet economy generally. So we look forward to seeing you there. Please let us know, email us, me, Drew at breakfast.media, or any other info at breakfast.media, or membership at breakfast.media if you've got any questions about upcoming events. The second thing I wanted to do is to just give a quick shout out to our sponsors. This free programming is possible because of the support of our sponsors. We encourage you, if you'd like to know more, to email me, Drew at breakfast.media, or go to our webpage when it's live again to learn more about us, broadbandbreakfast.com/about. Our sponsors include Utopia Fiber, Broadband.money, Google Fiber, Broadband Now, Lightbox, Wireless Infrastructure Association, Geo Partners, Ookla, Michael Baker International, Pinpoint Capital Advisors, Bitstream Communications, Positron Access, the California Emerging Technology Fund, and BroadbandToolkit.com. Thank you to our sponsors for the support that you provide. All right, I am going to go ahead and showcase our special guest. Gina, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Melissa and Ahmed, can I just ask you to turn your cameras off for the next 5 minutes so we can do a side-by-side with Gina Cooper-Benjamin. Gina Cooper-Benjamin is with the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and we will definitely be having a discussion on digital inclusion in the near future. But we wanted to have her on to tell us a little bit about the upcoming National Net Inclusion Conference. And go ahead, take it away, Gina. Tell us, our audience will be familiar with NTIA, but give us a little more context, and maybe about the Net Inclusion event that is happening later this month.
Hi, Drew, and everyone else. Thank you for having me. As Drew mentioned, my name is Gina Cooper Benjamin. I am the Deputy Director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, NTIA, and I'm located in Boston, Massachusetts. NTIA advances digital equity by supporting community members and equipping policymakers to act. The way we do this is we work in collaboration with over 1,000 affiliates of practitioners and advocates, and we all work collaboratively to increase access to affordable broadband, devices, digital skills training, and tech support. At NTIA, we provide spaces and opportunities for practitioners to meet for peer-to-peer learning, to discuss what's happening in their local communities. What we do during these conversations is that we listen hard and intently, and then we take what we learn and we create resources and tools that we provide on a Creative Commons model on our webpage. So basically any tool or resource that NTIA creates is open to the public, and you just have to credit us if you decide to use it or adapt it. One of the most recent tools we created was a state digital equity toolkit. And so that is something that you can find on our website, as long as resources for a digital navigator model and other really helpful tools. We share what we learn, or we take what we learn and we share it with policymakers. So we act as a bridge between those in our community of digital inclusion practitioners and policymakers. There's a constant education and learning process that's always happening when we're in community with one another. What I love about our work is that you can actually see the magic of NTIA in community calls and conversations and webinars. So you'll have these moments where people are in conversation and they're hearing something and they're learning something new and models from other communities. And they're like, oh, I could really use this in my community. Or can we touch base and talk about how you created this model, how you got funding for it, how you implemented it, so that they can replicate it in their own communities. We're not just doers. I like to think of us as also connectors. So one of the spaces that provides opportunities for sharing, learning, community, and fellowship is our annual conference. It's called Net Inclusion. This year, Net Inclusion is in San Antonio, Texas, from February 28th through March 2nd. This conference is very unique. So we curate a world-class event guided by those with lived experience and expertise in digital inclusion. There will be interactive workshops led by NTIA team members and NTIA partners. There will be breakout sessions. There's an opportunity to visit the robust digital inclusion ecosystem in San Antonio. So we'll be having site tours, lightning rounds where community members have 5 minutes to present on their programs and models on the main stage in the plenary space. And so I guess what is really important here is that we had originally closed registration, but there's so much demand for people to attend this conference that we reopened registration. So we reopened registration, and everyone is welcome to register up until February 14th. I like to say, show NTIA some love and register by Valentine's Day. We also have some opportunities for sponsorships available. I did provide some links that will be shared with you for our website and to register for the conference. Also, I invite you to visit digitalinclusion.org, our website, and join our community, where you can learn so much more about NTIA and other digital inclusion programs and practices and models and what's happening across the country with policy and funding and all the fun stuff. So
I know you've got to go. Can I just ask one question of you, Gina? So how has NTIA, you've been around for some time, right? And clearly before the pandemic, before the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, but how has the focus on this infrastructure investment affected NTIA? And how are you going to be talking about that and addressing that at Net Inclusion, February 28th to March 2nd?
Great question. So before the pandemic, NTIA was founded in 2015. We've been doing this for a while. So the pandemic NTIA is not a movement started by the pandemic, but a group of like-minded folks who knew that there was going to be we needed spaces and the opportunities to talk about digital equity. And so they created this community that's flourishing now. It has changed so much tremendously. So I joined NTIA in 2021. Our community has grown, has more than doubled in that time. I want to say it's maybe grown tenfold. I can't, I don't want to mislead, but I'm pretty sure that's about accurate. And so we have gained so many more practitioners, so many more people who are interested in digital equity and digital inclusion, or who were already doing it in their communities, but didn't know who to talk to. So many more people are in this space and really working to advance digital equity together nowadays. At the conference, we're going to be, we have some surprises in store. I can't give away all the secrets right now. You got to come and visit us in San Antonio to hear it all, but we will be providing, we will have conversations about how to maximize some of the funding coming down, how to get involved in your state or your region or your local areas, and get involved in conversations that are happening around this. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity to talk about this in community with others at Net Inclusion.
Well, Gina, thank you very much. So great to get a little mini taste of the Net Inclusion event. We look forward to hearing more about it and hopefully having some reporting out of it in Broadband Breakfast. We definitely want to get NTIA back for a future Broadband Breakfast live online session, which we focus on digital inclusion. But for now, let's excuse you and turn to our main topic. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you all in San Antonio.
All right. So thank you to our two panelists who will join this discussion. We've got a great crowd here. Thank you to all of you who have found us and watching us on Zoom while our website, at least when we started this, was down. We'll be addressing that as soon as we can. But let's go back to what we're going to be talking about today. We are going to talk about the Build America, Buy America laws impact on infrastructure. And in the framing for this event, we laid out how the NTIA, the National Telecommunications Information Administration, has guidelines for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, and these do require compliance with this quite old law, Build America, Buy America. It's been on the books for many years, which favors domestic manufacturing. And it was actually strengthened or tightened, I guess, whatever you'd like to say, in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And many in the industry have been warning how this will is raising prices on the goods necessary for broadband deployment. There is an active waiver that the NTIA has proposed for the middle mile grant program. This is just that small $1 billion program as opposed to the $42.5 billion BEAD program. And so we can learn a little bit about this. And in advance of this Broadband Breakfast Live Online, we at Broadband Breakfast published a report. It's available for members of the Broadband Breakfast Club. We've also shared with our panelists, and we're so grateful that you all have been here with us and participated. And the author of the report, Ahmed Hattout, is with us. He's our managing editor. And we're going to hear first, though, from Melissa Newman, who's the Vice President of Government Affairs at the Telecommunications Industry Association. And Melissa's background before we turn it over to her is as this government affairs experience. Prior to joining TIA, she was as the Vice President of Government Affairs. She worked at Transit Wireless, heading the legal and external affairs departments, as well as with WBK, a very well-known telecom law firm here in Washington, and also worked with CenturyLink, which is now Lumen, as Vice President of Federal Policy and Regulatory Affairs. And she was Deputy Division Chief of the Policy Division at the Federal Communications Commission previously. Welcome, Melissa, and thank you for being with us. And then after she speaks for 5 to 7 minutes, we'll be joined by Ahmed. Ahmed's our managing editor, as I mentioned. He's spent nearly or probably more than a decade now reporting on Canadian and American telecom and media industries. And he is responsible for leading our hard news coverage here at Broadband Breakfast. And he's the author of this report that we've mentioned and which is available for members of the Broadband Breakfast Club. So let me turn it over to you, Melissa. And I'm going to kind of highlight this, if you will, by what did you think of how explicit and extensive President Biden was in the State of the Union last night on how the Build America, Buy America law will apply to fiber optic cables?
So thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you today. The president was very explicit, and I have the words. Tonight, I'm also announcing new standards to require all construction materials in federal infrastructure projects to be made in America. And he specifically mentioned fiber optic cables. So here's the good news. We at TIA, and TIA, let me just step back for a minute. The Telecommunications Industry Association represents the global manufacturers and suppliers of information, communications, and technology equipment. So again, getting back to what the president said last night, we agree with much of what he said. TIA has never asked to waive the Buy American requirements for fiber. Fiber is made in the United States at sufficient capacity to meet the deployment requirements set out in the IIJA. The issue for us is twofold: lighting up that fiber and the components that are required to light it and make it work. And then, of course, not all broadband deployment will be utilizing fiber. There will be other technologies like fixed wireless access. And the issue, of course, then is the components of those technologies, of fixed wireless access technology. So that's where we go next. So again, support fiber optic cabling made in the United States, no issue. So let's figure out what to do next to light it up and to utilize other technologies where fiber doesn't make sense. We certainly appreciate the need to diversify the supply chains and create more jobs in the United States. And we've looked at this issue extensively, and this is where we come out factually. We have found that there is no combination of products and services for broadband that meets the requirements of Buy America. It means, in essence, we can't light up the fiber unless we get a waiver for some period of time to of the Buy America requirements. The biggest issue, although not the only issue here, is semiconductors. More than half of the value in each product category is from semiconductors. And as we know from the CHIPS Act and everything that's going on there to move semiconductor manufacturing to the United States, it will take 3 to 5 years to build a new fab. And I'm going to point out that the majority of the costs are semiconductors, and that's not even within the control of many of the companies who provide ICT, information communications and technology equipment. So, you know, this is a unified ecosystem that involves many different parts. ICT devices are extremely complex. There are hundreds of components in a cell phone, a router, and a hugely complex subcomponent supply chain. And so we do need a waiver for some components of the Buy America rules. And we're working closely with NTIA. We've talked to the Made in America office, and you know, we have some ideas. And one idea is, first of all, software and IP are not included in the Buy America rules, even though a lot of that is done in the United States. And in 2023, we think, given where the supply chain has gone, the Buy America rules should be updated to account for the changes in the manufacturing sector. We think that will help as well and reflects the realities of the manufacturing sector to include software and IP. So that's one idea that we will be talking more with the Department of Commerce and with the Made in America office. I do want to just point out historically that the Buy America rules have never been applied to the ICT sector. This is the first time. We've always had a commercial IT exemption, and for the ARRA 2009 America Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the Obama administration looked at this issue and they found it would be impossible at that point, to have Buy America apply, and so they provided a public interest waiver. So this is, the situation of where we're at. This is the reality of what we have to deal with. And so we look forward to working with the administration to make sure the twin goals of getting more manufacturing jobs in the United States and getting broadband deployment out to all unserved and underserved Americans becomes fulfilled. I will say that you can look at manufacturing jobs different ways. And one of the things we like to talk about is when you deploy broadband, you employ a lot of installers in the United States, which are great jobs. And I don't want to lose sight that how you define a manufacturing job should include the installers who provide, who install the cell towers, the poles, and all the equipment, and including, digging the trenches for the fiber and everything else that goes into bringing broadband deployment. So we know when we do that, we will have a lot of jobs for Americans.
Wonderful. No, again, we couldn't have timed this better. And thank you for being so willing to come on and walk us through the factual situation, what it's like, and quite frankly, the pickle that the industry is in, given what I was surprised by, the extremely explicit inclusion of fiber optic broadband in this Buy American label. Now, again, we've got this report. We just published it 2 days ago on the what you need to know about the Buy America, Build America, Buy America provisions. Ahmed, you've looked at this, you've turned it around, you've done a lot on it. Let's go ahead and turn to you to give us a kind of a short summary, if you will, of the report that you've authored, that we've published for members of the Broadband Breakfast Club, and if either you or Em could share the report in PDF form so people can just see it and see what's available, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, so we embarked on this topic because it's timely. We don't just write reports because we can. It's very timely. Obviously, the NTIA has until June 30th to distribute the money to the states, the BEAD money. There's an outstanding waiver proposal by the NTIA for the middle mile program, again, as Drew mentioned, for $1 billion. This report kind of goes through a bit of a comprehensive road of the BABA waiver on, or in the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So included are the legal things, as explained in layman's as best as possible, but also the outstanding waivers, the waivers that have already been granted. We talk about industry concerns. Melissa laid them out fairly well. So, I mean, there really isn't much new there, but there is some reporting in there, some original reporting about some letters that were sent, or a letter that was sent to a senator about some of the components that are requested for a waiver. And that's from the Fiber Broadband Association. We tried to get them on, but they were very busy. And that would have been nice, because I'm sure they have a lot to say, and they will have a lot to say in the future about this. So we do lay out, I think, in as comprehensive a manner as possible, everything you kind of need to know about this, including, some of the figures and the technologies that are requested for a waiver, as well as the technologies that the NTIA is proposing for the middle mile. Now, the why there's a middle mile waiver and not one for the BEAD program, we asked. We still haven't received a response, but we will be absolutely following up with the NTIA about that.
Thanks, Ahmed. will you talk just a little bit about, again, some of the piecing together, and we hope to be able to just, again, share this on the screen momentarily. There we go. Okay. So this is the report, what it looks like, about 2,000 words. We do, and just so everyone knows, we do one of these reports every month for Broadband Breakfast Club members. Last month it was on what you need to know about broadband mapping. The month before, December, it was our somewhat hopefully clever 12 days of broadband, and we did 12 stories on the top broadband related items for 2022. This month, obviously, we focused on this. So yeah, if you could just hide the screen or collapse the screen there on the side there. Ahmed, would you be good enough to talk a little bit about the history of the law, those 3 sections, and even about the waivers that were previously included in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act? Melissa alluded to this, but didn't specifically talk about that existence of a waiver.
Right. So the specifics of the IIJA, the BABA waiver possibility in the IIJA is essentially, or rather I should talk about the BABA, is that at least 55% of the components of a product, the cost of the components of a product have to be made in America. And so, as Melissa alluded to, the problem is that the components are not that simple. There are various components that come largely from outside of the United States. And I think just a little deviation, the industry is in agreement, I think from what I've heard, on the need to make, the United States a bit more independent when it comes to this, when it comes to these components. It's just the timeline for what they're trying to do right now would make it very difficult, either really difficult or really expensive. And that's where we enter into the BABA waiver possibilities, because the NTIA or the law itself stipulates that the NTIA could step in and say, well, if this is a public interest concern, then we could provide a waiver. The other is that if the cost of making the components in the United States exceeds 25% of project cost, there could be a waiver possibility there too. And that's principally what we've been hearing from industry, that it would cost dramatically more if a lot of these components would have to be made in America. So there are outs in the law. And I think with respect to the law itself, the components and how much of the components or the percentage of the cost of the components of the product itself that is made toward the project is of great concern here. I don't know if that answered all of your questions. Sorry, I'm trying to go in the order of you asking the questions.
Yes, and I apologize. My connectivity must have gone down a little bit. Just as a reminder, our website is down. Last time I checked, 28 minutes ago. We will attend to this as soon as we're done with this program. When you are on our website, you can just go to that link I put in there that invites you to join the Broadband Breakfast Club for $99 a month. You get a monthly report. This report. So it's not available for everyone, but we are talking about the topic. And could you just go like 1 or 2 pages into the report? Ahmed laid out those 3 different points about the 3 components. Steel products, right? Construction of new, just stay right there. Construction of new cell towers. Then the second is the manufactured product must be manufactured domestically. And then the third is that construction materials, all manufacturing processes must be made in the US. Could you just speak to those and again, just address the waiver in 2009 that was offered?
Right. So it's I think there has been a little bit of a vagueness, I think, generally about what is considered made in America or produced in America. And it really is almost the entire process, right? It's not just that, it's the cost, 55% of the cost, but you have to consider each component. And if each component of the network build, for example, is not meeting the 55% requirement, then it could be considered not made in America or could not meet that the BABA requirement. I can speak to the more recent waivers Now, the more recent waivers were done on a public interest, the public interest exemption more than it is the financial exemption. I mean, not at all. I mean, we have seen that the NTIA for the tribal broadband program did it on an equity concern because the applications for the tribal broadband program were submitted before the IIJA was passed in November 2021. And we've seen that with the one other program that it was essentially that there were getting some applications, but it was before the law was put in place. So in terms of precedent, in terms of, what the NTIA is drawing from, there have been a lot of concern from industry about this issue, and it's made it to the middle mile program. But again, we're not getting any indication, and we don't know yet, but I imagine we will find out pretty soon whether there may be some waiver on the BEAD program itself, the larger BEAD program.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in
Yeah,
for a minute?
Please do.
Yeah. So, Ahmed made a point that, middle mile, why didn't they maybe, I'm extrapolating a little bit. So if I didn't get it exactly the way you said it, middle mile went first, why not be next? And I think honestly, it made sense the way NTI did this. And the reason is twofold. First of all, the funds from middle mile are going to be dispersed before BEAD. So it made sense to do the middle mile work on the middle mile waiver. And as you know, there is a draft waiver and comments were filed, and we're waiting, hopefully all is good. But it made sense for that to go first. The money is going to be dispersed first. Secondly, there are different components that you use for middle mile that you use for BEAD. So it wouldn't seem that you could have the exact same waiver for both, because you have to do an analysis of the market differently for middle mile than you do for BEAD. And certainly TIA and its members, are happy and are working, with the administration to talk about those different components for each program. So I just want to say, I do think that NTIA and the Made in America office are doing it appropriately first here. And then we'll, and then of course we'll be looking at and I'm sure they are already at the BEAD waiver, but it made sense to do the middle mile first.
Okay, great. Ahmed, anything you want to say? I definitely want to kind of open a broader conversation. And for each of you who are with us on this program, our regular weekly free program, we do invite your questions. Please fire them off. We have two people who are experts in this process. And as I kind of drilled into this myself, what's the case law on Build America, Buy America? I mean, it's pretty much waivers, right? Waivers are they are the case law, right? And as I mentioned briefly, there was a 2009 waiver when the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program, as part of the Obama administration American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, there was a waiver that covered pretty much everything, as I understand it. So Ahmed or Melissa, please kind of clarify, update on the history of this. But I guess the kind of the point I'm going to, and what I'd like us to talk about is, well, how hard is it to get waivers, and what are we kind of expecting from both waivers that have been issued and waivers that have been applied for?
I can speak from a reporting perspective. One issue that we'll be kind of following in terms of long term is whether the 42.5 billion is enough. And I think one of the parallels that we're looking at is, if this is going to, if the BABA rules stand, and there's again complaint from some of the industry associations, and I'm assuming they're members, who are talking about the increase in cost for these products. There's a parallel legislation that was proposed about taxing or shielding from tax the federal funds. And so we've heard simultaneously that 42.5 from some organizations that it's not enough to connect the entire country. I don't know if there's some disagreement on that, but it would be interesting, I guess, for the future in terms of what we may be looking at is whether some of those a convergence of issues would present some future problems for bills in terms of the financing.
Melissa, do you have any historical context on this back in the Recovery Act in 2009?
I will just say what I said in my remarks. The industry has always, up until now, been either under a waiver or the rules did not apply. So that's the history. Now in the IIJA, the rules apply. So we are working with the administration to do this, but it's novel and new for our industry because of either non-applicability or a waiver existed.
Okay.
And that means, that as we go through where are things sourced and this or that, it's just going to take time to get information that we have never had to provide before.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, you have the realities of the marketplace. I'm going to contrast this a little bit to what Ahmed said. I totally understand the cost point, but separate from the cost point is the realities of the marketplace is this stuff many of it has not been made in the United States. And the time frame for getting, BEAD deployed, we want to make sure we hit those, we get it deployed, and at the same time we work with the administration on, creating more and being able to manufacture more in the United States. They're twin goals that we definitely want to work with the administration. To Ahmed's point about the $42 billion, there is an issue about whether this money, he is correct, is going to be taxed. And I understand the convergence of those issues, but I really look at them separately because it goes to the size of the fund necessary to get broadband out to every American.
Great. No, and it's useful to raise that issue. These are kind of, as we covered the IIJA, in the early phases, i.e. last year, right? These were two issues that kind of kept bubbling up, the taxation issue and the waiver issue. And they were kind of issues sort of above NTIA's pay grade, right? They couldn't do anything about taxes, and apparently they couldn't or can't do anything about waivers, except when they can.
I'm not. Yeah.
Okay. So what waivers have been applied for and granted, and will we still see any more waivers now? What do you think, Melissa?
I think we know that the middle mile waiver draft was issued. NTIA worked on that, I'm sure, coordinated across all relevant government agencies. And we will continue to talk to NTIA through the process about the BEAD waiver. I do think that they are looking into these issues substantively and deeply. And I appreciate OMB guidance that was given a while back that said agencies they're the first stop. You talk to the agency, the particular agency. In our case, it's NTIA and the Department of Commerce. I'm sure for other, the auto industry, it's a different agency, that you talk to that agency first about your situation. So they are the experts, NTIA and Department of Commerce, on these issues, and they work with and consult and receive guidance from the Made in America office.
So let's just talk a little bit about the Made in America office, if you will. And I know that's a specific question, but to back up 30 seconds, one of the big themes that I observed while I was there in the House gallery last night, looking out over President Biden and hearing him talk, was the fact that America has a real problem with the supply chains, right? And he specifically went over this narrative, and he said, look, we need more chips in America. 30 years ago, 40% of semiconductors were manufactured in the United States. Today, that's 10%. So this was kind of like the key point he made, highlighted the CHIPS and Science Act as a solution for that. And then he said, the supply chain for America needs to start in America. And that led into the discussion of infrastructure. That led into the discussion of Build America, Buy America, the importance of sort of American jobs, so to speak. And then, of course, later on, he talked about, competition with China, right? And that's also sort of looming over the discussions about supply chain issues. And so I say that in the sense that the kind of political reality is firmly settled on get your acts together and start making fiber in the United States industry. That's kind of the message that's come out. But I want to kind of, again, in the details, what does the industry do right now to be able to meet these requirements for building out fiber all across America?
So the good news is fiber is made in the United States. So I think we're good there. TIA has not asked for a waiver of fiber optic cable. The issue is the components and the electronics attached to the fiber that lights it up and makes it work. So the good news is we do have some components that are made in America, and then we have others that we need a waiver.
Mm-hmm. So, Ahmed, do you want to add anything more on kind of the way the other supply chain issues interact with this Build America, Buy America provision? You're on mute, Ahmed.
No, just that I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea, but as Melissa would, I think, tell you is that the industry is kind of aligned on, this objective for moving in the direction that, become more independent in the United States. But it's just the timeline seems the current state of the market, I guess, with the exception of fiber, is that it's a lot more complicated. The reliance on foreign supplies is deep, and the supply chain issues that have been identified that the pandemic has made very clear is that this is a problem, and that's the direction that I think Washington and the industry is looking at going forward.
In the report, we cover multiple different waiver requests or applied for, and I want to mention one that was applied for. I don't think it's been addressed. That is the Shelby, the Schools, Health, and Libraries Broadband Coalition. They've applied for a waiver, and then we mention and link to the waivers that have been granted, right? And there are several specific ones that pertain to tribal broadband and the connecting minority communities. We have a question here from one of our attendees, and it is a great question that I think we can hear from both of our panelists here, and it is: does Build America, Buy America apply to capital project funds awarded projects as well, or only for BEAD, middle mile, et cetera? That's from Mike Dunn. What are your thoughts on that, Melissa?
I'm going to let Ahmad take this first, and then because you've done probably more of the legal research on this.
Well, in fact, I haven't actually seen that the component in the capital funds, but if we look at the waivers that were granted for, and again, I don't want to make a mistake here, so if I'm wrong, then the connecting minority communities, they got a waiver on BABA. There are some peripheral programs under the NTIA that have gotten waivers. So my guess would be it does, but again, I could be wrong. So I don't want to say 100% certainty that, but it's a very good question. That's something that we should explore.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll be honest, we have been focused on at TIA, the middle mile and a BEAD waiver. So I probably am not going to speculate on something else, but it's a good question.
All right, we have a new question from Dan Grossman. Most of the economic value in an installed OLT or ONT, optical, right, terminal, I'm messing with the L and the NR, but please fill us in there. And its key semiconductor parts is in IP, intellectual property, and software. Both the largest supplier of the key semiconductors and the 4 largest equipment suppliers do the majority of their development in the United States as well as assembly in the United States. Doesn't this point to the fundamental flaw in the law? So let's hear from Melissa first on this.
So that is a point, and I appreciate it, that we have been talking to the government about. That in 2023, those IP and software is done a lot in the United States, and the law, in our view, should reflect that. So I agree with that point, and we'd like to work with the administration on updating the laws to reflect the realities of today's manufacturing. And that includes both the development of IP and software that is done here.
Ahmed, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I think most have covered it. Yeah.
Okay. I have just put in the links. These are 2 Commerce Department websites. Okay, and Dan's helpfully defined ONT, optical network terminal. I thought that's what the part that sits in the home. And go ahead and put in the chat what OLT stands for. We hate acronyms. We always want to unpack them and explain them so that we can keep on a knowledgeable playing field. The optical line terminal. Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Optical network terminal, optical line terminal. And so the last 2 links that I put, again, in the Zoom link, we'll have to put them on the site for our other platforms later, is the Build America, Buy America. Think of it as the homepage, and this is a list. This is the second list there, second link there that I just sent. Below is a list of all pending and approved Department of Commerce, Build America, Buy America waivers. And then there's 2 proposed comments. One is the NTIAs, and then the other is the, I think the other one is, if I remember correctly, it's called the Department of Commerce department-wide public interest waiver of the Buy America domestic content procurement preferences for small infrastructure project purchases, small grants, and minor components within iron and steel products. And then there are, as you noted already, Ahmed, 3 approved waivers, one by the NTIA for tribal broadband connectivity infrastructure, one for Economic Development Administration adjustment period, and then another for the Connecting Minority Communities Pilot Program Awards. We have another question that I want to ask our panel. It's not directly related to Build America, Buy America, but Melissa, could you speak to resources that TIA has available to help members demonstrate their equipment meeting BEAD climate resilient requirements? And this is actually something we picked up on as we attended these office hours. And that's how we heard about this waiver, the NTIA middle mile waiver that we reported on in September, is from attending these office hour sessions. And in those office hour sessions, there was lots of concern and discussions about the climate resilience.
Yeah.
So, Melissa, go ahead and address that brief off topic, but important topic.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that question. So there are a number of new requirements in the BEAD program that have never been required before in a grant program. One is climate resilience. Another one is cybersecurity and supply chain risk management. That is in the NOFO, and plans that you have to, do, eligible entities have to do, to do their best to ensure that, their networks are, they're not cybersecurity, that they're secure and trusted. And so, look, TIA has a special expertise in supply chain security, risk management, and cybersecurity, and we do have resources available to be able to help eligible entities, meet those requirements. With respect to climate resilience and other issues, I'm going to put a plug for something that TIA is doing on April 19th and 20th. We are holding a BEAD Success Summit in Washington, D.C., bringing together the state broadband offices, federal government, and industry to talk about these newer and novel issues that are in this NOFO that haven't been in other grant programs. And we think this is a great opportunity to bring everybody together with the goal of, writing an application that, deals with all these newer type requirements. So the best I can say is, we want to have this conversation in DC over a 2-day summit. And we do have resources in particular for the cybersecurity and supply chain risk management requirements of the NOFO.
Great. We look forward to learning more about that and talking more about that in the future. I want to come back again, remind our audience, we've got a few more minutes, about 10 more minutes for questions. I've got a couple more that I'll come to, and one that I want to come up with right now is, could you speak a little bit to this definitions? And I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying here, Melissa, when you said you want software included in Build America, Buy America, what does that mean exactly? And what's the sort of reason for going that route? I mean, is this kind of like a parity or fairness question with one thing's going to get kind of, no foreign products for federal contracts on physical. We can't have foreign software. Is that the idea? And could you just unpack that a little bit, Melissa?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, there has been a lot of software development, R&D development. That is a critical part of the manufacturing process. And I'm going to say you don't need, a PhD from MIT to be able to do software and IP development. So we consider that to be a manufacturing job. Unfortunately, the Buy America rules don't count software and IP development as a manufacturing job. Good news is a lot of software development and IP manufacturing is done in the United States by US workers. So it seems that the rules could be updated to include things we are doing that are truly, in our view, considered a manufacturing type job in 2023.
Okay. So is this a way of saying that this is a way to get more inclusiveness and is it going to make life easier or harder for the tech industry? Maybe that's kind of what I'm asking.
I think it shows where manufacturing jobs are being done in the United States, and they should be then included in the Buy America requirements, because the Buy America rules, because it does actually lead to US workers doing manufacturing in the United States. It helps promote the goals of Buy America, which is more manufacturing jobs in the United States. We're just pointing out two areas where there is more jobs being done in the United States through software development here and IP.
Right. We have another great question from Catherine Krantz. Without waivers, what would this process look like in terms of costs, time? Is it even possible, worth doing? What are your reactions to kind of, again, the worst case scenario for industry, if you will, and that there are no waivers granted, and what happens? How is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act provisions for deployment of broadband networks going to be impacted?
So I would say two things. First, on the cost side, we're still looking at that. So I can't say how much of an increase there would be in costs at this point. But with respect to the timeline of being able to deploy networks, I said in my comments, we have found so far in talking to our members in the industry that there are no combination of products and services for broadband that meets the requirements of Buy America.
Yeah, it's worth repeating. There's nothing out there that works. We can't do this if this language goes forward as President Biden said it last night.
Well, he talked about fiber optic cable, so I want to separate the two. That is doable. There are other components that are needed with the fiber optic cable to make the cable work. That's where we have some issues.
Okay.
And that's where we need the waiver. So I do want to separate the two. And if you do not get a waiver, I don't know how to make the fiber optic cable light up. It'll be in the ground, but I don't know how to make it light up and transmit the signal within the time frame that we all want to get broadband deployed to all Americans.
So just to clarify, you're saying that fiber is produced in such a manner that 55% of the value of the fiber is made in America,
Yeah.
but the electronic equipment is not produced in such a manner that 55% of the value of that electron. What if you combine the fiber and the electronic equipment? Can you get 55% from that?
And no, that's where we found that the combination, that's a really good question. The combination of those two products and services don't meet the 55%.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a large part because semiconductor is a big part of the cost component.
Right.
And we know from the Chips and Science Act that semiconductors are not made here. That is actually outside of the control of the ICT industry. But Drew, you are absolutely correct. The combination of two doesn't get there. But I do want to state this. TIA has not asked for a waiver of fiber optic cabling.
Got it. Is in a weird sort of way, is this interpretation that we've seen, this explicit statement, is this kind of handicapping fiber versus non-fiber wireless and other technologies, Melissa?
I'm sorry, I was reading the chat when you said it. So could you repeat that?
Sorry, it has because the electronics that are powering the fiber is what's making you not meet the 55% rule. Is it possible that there's a way to do this without fiber? And is this kind of handicapping fiber in a weird sort of way?
No, we don't want to do this without fiber. We need all technologies to be brought to the table to solve this digital, and fiber is a huge part of that, along with other technologies. So it just means we have to work this through with the administration, Department of Commerce, and the Made in America office to figure out the best path forward to be able to deploy the right technology in the right place at the time frame we all want it done.
We have another question, and then I'll ask a final one of both of you. Steve Pastorkovich of NTCT, NTRC. Oh, sorry, I won't get it right. Steve, correct me when you get a chance. Has there been any Build America, Buy America discussions regarding the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Act with the National Association of Manufacturers? What do they think of the IP component? So I think that's a reaction to your statement, Melissa, about the software components. Could you address Steve's question?
Look, we talk a lot with other associations. I can't really, I don't know if I'm in the position to talk about what other associations are doing. We certainly coordinate, and I'm happy to further explore that. I don't with you.
All right.
I know other associations are looking into this. Yes.
Another quick follow-up before I get to my last one is Buy America office. Who are they? Are they part of Commerce Department? It's separate from NTIA clearly, but can you give our listeners much insight into that Buy America office?
They're part of OMB, Office of Management and Budget.
Okay. And we did invite OMB because it was kind of a breaking news. We weren't able to get them, but we look forward to having them back and having someone from the Buy America office talk about that. Well, this truly is kind of, like I said, a breaking news story. I mean, it's obviously been out there, but I was, again, quite surprised at how direct and specific, and how now the industry, the telecommunications industry, fiber industry, other components, software, wireless, et cetera, will have to react to this. And we haven't even talked about, responses. In some ways, Senator John Thune kind of raised this in highlighting this concern. And this is, again, the lead off of our report, which we encourage you to, as soon as our site's back up, we encourage you to go to and join Broadband Breakfast Club and get it. I want to ask each of you, and let's go with Ahmed first, and then Melissa, last word. What are some of the issues that you expect to be in play over the next period of months on this, and widen the lens a little bit, like talk a little bit about some of the very strong restrictions on Chinese equipment as an example. How is that impacting this? Obviously, this Buy America impacts even Western-made products from a Western European country or a democratic country. So there's kind of an issue within an issue there. But I do want to just get your thoughts, Ahmed and Melissa, on what we should be watching for over the next period of months and the next year with regard to broadband infrastructure and the Build America, Buy America.
Well, you raise a really good point that I hadn't brought up in my comments, which is a lot of stuff is also made in Mexico and other friendly countries that we work really, really well with, and we should be able to rely on those countries who are our allies, and we have tariffs. Situations with China where things coming in from China have a 25% tariff. That obviously increases the cost. If it goes through Mexico or some other, country, there is no tariff. So it is a complex ecosystem, but I do want to say that, look, our supply chain is global, and it involves a lot of trusted companies that have supported the United States in deployment and development of broadband in our country. And, that's important that it continues. We hope we can work with, Department of Commerce and OMB on those issues as well, because we do have an issue with some companies in China, and we need to make sure that what we're using are secure and trusted networks. And we have a lot of companies, and I will say all companies that belong to TIA are secure and trusted. I mean, we don't. And so we want to make sure that they continue to be able to support the United States like they always have.
Well, thank you for those comments. Ahmed, what are your observations as you've looked at this field?
I think Washington is kind of tackling the Chinese issue from a number of different angles. Obviously, the FCC has moved to kind of address the equipment, replacement of the equipment, but also the NTIA obviously is looking at the money from the Chips and Science Act. That's the $1.5 billion innovation fund. We've reported on the comments from that. That could be something that's very interesting because they're the allies, the United States, the UK, Canada, are in agreement on some open access protocols that would broaden the standards for use. So there's interoperability with radio communications. And so in terms of, replacing and mitigating kind of the national security threat, which you could say is part of the reason why there are BABA rules in the first place, we're seeing kind of an emergence of a number of different things that Washington and the industry are trying to work together to address.
Well, that will have to be our last word. Don't miss next week on Broadband Breakfast Live Online, when we will be speaking about how state broadband offices are approaching the next phase of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. On behalf of our two guests, Melissa Newman, Ahmed Atut, I'm Drew Clark of Broadband Breakfast. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.